Yeah,
All
well,
right.
getting up here to the top of the mountain. Hey, welcome back to the Sunday Serving channel, where you come for gospel, hope, and joy, inspiration, and occasionally maybe even some wisdom.
I don't know if I have wisdom.
So I brought my friend Timothy here today, the young Bible scholar. He may have also been the friend of Paul, were you?
I have friends called Paul.
Okay,
Yes.
good. So we're walking up this hill here, this high and holy mountain on the top of Woodcrest called Reservoir Hill. A lot of history here. Beautiful spot
Yeah.
to take in the glory of God's nature. And Timothy and I were talking about mountains. So I thought that might be a good topic today for the serving.
Yeah.
What is it about mountains? Yeah. God and mountains, like what draws man to mountains? And mountains are mentioned so often in the Bible. So many important things happen on mountains.
Yeah.
God called Moses to the mountain to give him the 10 Commandments, really the covenant with his people.
Elijah.
Right, Elijah.
Yeah. Elijah called people to the mountain for confrontation, clarity.
When Noah built his ark, right?
They landed on the mountain.
They landed on Mount Ararat.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Transfiguration on a mountain.
The Transfiguration, that's a wonderful story. Jesus went to the mountain often to pray alone, to be with God.
Yeah.
So much happened on mountains. And you know, sometimes it seems like the mountain that we have to climb is so difficult that we can't make it. And so there's real mountains, there's physical mountains, there's metaphysical mountains. Mm-hmm. So why go to the mountain? And why climb it? And I love that old song, you know, Lord, don't move the mountain,
but give me strength to climb it.
Give me strength, or teach me, Lord, to climb it.
Teach me, Lord, to climb it. Yeah.
So if the mountain doesn't come to you, go to the mountain. Let's sit here and talk a bit about mountains. So, do you have any good Bible verses about mountains?
Yeah.
I picked out a few here. What do you have?
Well, that one that you pointed out about pilgrimage. I lift my eyes to the hills. From where does my help come, or whatever it says.
Yeah.
It made me think. So we were lucky enough to live over there, and when you're over there, you see the reality of it. People going up to Jerusalem. If you're going down the Jordan Valley and then you're hiking up to Jerusalem, you drive on that highway in a car. It takes about half an hour. It's a long hike, and they knew that at the top of this mountain they could encounter God. So that passage, I guess it's from the Psalms, yeah.
Yeah, I have it here, Psalm 121.
Yeah.
The Song of Ascents, it's called. So the Song of Climbing.
Yeah.
I lift my eyes to the hills, whence comes my help, or my help comes from the hills.
Yeah, so apparently they would sing those songs as they were hiking from Jericho to Jerusalem, that long trek through the desert, and then as it gets greener and more lush as you get closer to Jerusalem. Yeah.
So let's talk about that mountain. Jerusalem is built on a mountain, and that mountain is really significant in biblical history, in the Old Testament, in the founding of the
Mount
Jewish
Moriah,
kingdom.
And Mount Zion.
Remind us of a couple of those stories.
So there's two mountains that are significant in Jerusalem, and Mount Moriah is, according to tradition and according to the Bible, the book of Genesis, is where Abraham went when he was tested he was asked to offer his son to God. And of course we know that didn't happen, but it was the ultimate test, the ultimate test of faith. And then Mount Zion is where David chose to make his capital, the center of Jerusalem, on Mount Zion. And so there too, it had great significance in the history of Israel. But there's also that verse in Isaiah chapter 2 about the mountain of the Lord's house will be established as the highest among the mountains.
Yeah.
What I love about that is when you go there, Mount Moriah is actually lower than all the other mountains. Like, it's surrounded, at least on the western and the southern side, with higher mountains. So I guess the prophecy is one day
it'll be lifted
up, like in reality, because right now it's not.
That's Isaiah 2, right?
Yeah.
So Isaiah 2,
Yeah.
verse 2, it says, "It shall come to pass in the latter days that the mountain of the house of the Lord shall be established as the highest of the mountains, and shall be lifted up above the hills, and all the nations shall flow to it."
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Because we can think about it, whatever, metaphysically, like the significance of God's house and all that, but also in reality, it's a small mountain now, and maybe one day it will be a big mountain.
TJ, what do you think Jesus meant when he, several times he was talking about, if you have faith, you can say to this mountain, be cast into the sea, and it'll happen?
That's a good question. Because obviously I wondered to myself also. I don't know if I have that kind of faith, but then he says it's the faith the size of a mustard seed. But there is something about the mountain as the ultimate obstacle or the ultimate challenge. Because when you go up on a mountain, as we see if we read these stories in the Bible, you don't have anything to depend on other than it's just you and God out in the wilderness facing this challenge. So maybe there's a thing about mountains being the test, the challenge, I don't know, that faith can move them. Yeah.
Faith can move the biggest obstacle.
Yeah.
That's why he chose the picture of the mountain.
I think so.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
So you mentioned as we were walking up here the story of the Transfiguration, and that's an important story in the life of Jesus. What was he trying to tell the disciples, and why did it happen on a mountain? Should we read that first?
Sure, yeah, let's read it.
It's in a couple of the Gospels.
Should I read it?
Yeah, you go ahead and read it.
Yeah.
What's your favorite Gospel telling? Is it Luke or Matthew?
Well, Luke and Matthew are very similar, so I'll just read here. It's Matthew 17. "And after 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter and James and John his brother, and led them up a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became white as light. And behold, there appeared to them Moses and Elijah, talking with him. And Peter said to Jesus, 'Lord, it is good that we are here. If you wish, I will make 3 tents here, one for you, and one for Moses, and one for Elijah.' He was still speaking when, behold, a bright cloud overshadowed them, and a voice from the cloud said, 'This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him.' When the disciples heard this, they fell on their faces and were terrified. But Jesus came and touched them, saying, 'Rise and have no fear.' And when they lifted up their eyes, they saw no one but Jesus only. And as they were coming down the mountain, Jesus commanded them, 'Tell no one the vision until the Son of Man is raised from the dead.'" Then they have that discussion about Elijah. Should I go ahead and read that?
Yeah, sure. Finish off that's good.
"And the disciples asked him, 'Then why do the scribes say that first Elijah must come?' He answered, 'Elijah does come, and he will restore all things. But I tell you that Elijah has already come, and they did not recognize him, but did to him whatever they pleased. So also the Son of Man will certainly suffer at their hands.' Then the disciples understood that he was speaking to them of John the Baptist." There's so many layers.
There's a lot in there, isn't there? That story.
Yeah.
The fact that he took those 3 disciples, maybe the closest of the disciples to him. I mean, Peter was the rock, and John and James, brothers, right?
Sons of Thunder.
Sons of Thunder, I love that. And we all know that John had this really close relationship to the heart of Jesus. And they went up this mountain, and
so
why?
Yeah, that's the thing. This is where this is so fascinating. Why does Jesus have to take them away from civilization, from whatever? Because right down at the bottom of this mountain where this happened, if I'm correct in assuming that it happened on Mount Hermon, there's this big city, Caesarea Philippi. So I think there's a significance that they had to go away from people, from civilization, from whatever, resources, comfort, and to a place where they really were alone. And that, I mean, we were in that area. I was lucky enough to climb that mountain. Once you're up there, you really are alone.
Hermon.
Yeah, Hermon.
And I guess, there's something about climbing up to the heights, up to heaven, up to to God.
There's when the people fell into idol worship, the high places is the same thing. They had this urge to get closer to God, and they would build altars on mountains, and they didn't understand the significance of how wrong it was to build an altar to a pagan god on a mountain. But again, the urge to come closer to God. Yeah.
So they're up there, and it says he was transfigured, right? His face shone like the sun. His clothes became white as light as lightning, and then this appearance
of two figures,
of two prophets
associated with mountains.
Moses, who climbed Mount Sinai,
and Mount Nebo,
and
Elijah, who climbed Mount Carmel.
Mount Carmel to fight that battle against the prophets of Baal, right?
Those two people, their big iconic moments are on mountaintops. Yeah. So it links it together.
And two of the most important prophets of the coming of the Messiah and God working in his relationship, his covenant with man.
Yeah.
But it doesn't say, it says he was still speaking, so he must have been speaking to them, right?
Oops.
And then this voice of God comes out of that, and that's sort of similar to God speaking to Moses.
Yeah.
God speaking to Elijah.
Yeah, and the cloud.
God, the cloud.
The cloud in the desert, in the wilderness.
This is my beloved son in whom I am well pleased. So that was really that, and those three disciples heard that. They heard that declaration. They heard the voice of God. Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
This is my son in whom I am well pleased. And so that's just an amazing story. Of course, that made them terrified, and that's always that's always what happens when we as mortals are faced with the power, the majesty, the might of God. Similar when an angel appears, right? It always says terror.
And the angel has to tell them, don't be scared.
And always the message is, do not be afraid. Yeah. Jesus came to them, this time Jesus came to them and touched them and saying, rise and have no fear. Same message. Yeah. Same message that Jesus gave to them, the angels gave to all the people that met God.
So can we talk for a minute about the tents thing?
Yeah, sure. What does that mean?
That's
Tell me
something
about that.
I was wondering about. So I think it connects to this theme of being in a place where you have to depend on God. So in Judaism, they have this festival called Sukkot, and it's right at the height of the harvest. It's one of the three big festivals, and what you're supposed to do in the festival is to go out of your house for 8 days and build a shelter and live in the shelter and have your meals in the shelter and sleep in the shelter. And it's supposed to remind you, right at the time when you're celebrating the good year, the harvest, that you have all you need, it's supposed to remind you to depend on God. And I think there's a connection there. They're on a mountain, they're away from everything, they have to depend on God. And I think probably this is happening during that festival. Otherwise, Peter wouldn't have asked the question. But I think it's all connected. Dependence on God, the shelters, being on a mountain. The mountain is where you encounter God. The wilderness is where you encounter God. The shelters were built with an opening towards the sky,
towards heaven.
Yeah, towards
not
heaven.
Northwest, east, or south.
Yeah, so that you would remember that God is in heaven. So I think it's all tied together. There's this whatever. It's all there's significance to all of it.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. So.
Well, I don't know about you, TJ, but I've often been drawn to mountains, and mostly they've been more local, domestic ones, maybe not as exotic as some of the ones you've been to. I've never been to Mount Sinai. I have been to Mount Carmel, and Mount Hermon we at least saw. Yeah. And of course in Jerusalem there's Mount Zion, or Mount what's the one that Abraham sacrificed?
Moriah.
Was called to test that
Mount
test.
Moriah.
Mount Moriah, which is the Temple Mount, right?
Yeah.
But out here we can see the Catskill Mountains. The highest one there is Slide Mountain, and the Adirondack Mountains. There's there's something about climbing a wild mountain that brings you close to faith, to God, to it's really a religious experience, and I guess you know, people are drawn to climbing you know, the challenges of climbing Mount Everest or Mount Blanc, you know.
Yeah, you've been to the Alps.
I've been to the Alps, climbed some mountains there. I've been out the Rockies in the western part of our country. In fact, we have a community out there in Idaho near the Sawtooth Mountains, and that's beautiful. Like that experience of being there, it just everything, all the worries, all the cares, all the you know, the perspective changes.
Yeah.
It's a bit maybe similar. I've never been to space, but they say everybody that goes up to space and they see the fragile Earth there, and it just
it blows
away everything that you think's important, and you realize God is important.
Yeah.
And what is His greatest commandment? To love God with your heart, with your mind, with your strength, with your soul, with all your being, and to love
your neighbor as
yourself. Yeah. So maybe that's long enough for today. TJ, do you have any other thoughts?
No, this was good. This was good. Yeah.
Well, go to the mountain, climb it, find God, and if there's a mountain of life that you're discouraged about, pray for the strength to God to teach you, to give you strength to climb it. Don't try to go around it. Don't flee. And when we see the glory of God, yes, we will fall on our face in terror, but someone, Jesus, an angel, will say, "Fear not," and we'll believe that. So God bless you. Have a wonderful weekend, hopefully on a mountain somewhere. If not, you can dream of it, pray about it, read about it, and we'll see you next week, maybe from a valley. We'll have to see.
Yeah.
Take care. See you later. Delta loves climbing mountains, and Remy still tries to climb mountains.